My name is Pronko. So today we're going to talk about checkout, how to extend, and maybe we will discuss your issues. So checkout. Checkout in Magento2 was refactored from ground zero. Compared to Magento1, it's completely new application. Now it's single page application. I'm going to talk about this in slides. It's having proper checkout API, meaning that business logic related to checkout, like placing order, creating, selecting shipping, payment method, is no longer sitting in controllers, right? Action controllers. It's in API. You can reuse. You can write your custom integration without actual usage of user interface. So you can work with checkout through API. It's based on new UI components. I'm going to show you. It's interesting that in checkout there is no inline JavaScript. I haven't found. Of course, there may be some legacy stuff in Magento core, but there is no inline JavaScript because of new UI components which Magento team introduced for Magento2 Community Edition. And checkout now is independent application, meaning that it can scale. If you have 5,000 orders per minute, you can add extra servers, additional servers, and you can scale only checkout part of your website. Of course, this support of having additional servers exists in Community Edition, but all the functionality is sitting on enterprise level, and I don't know, maybe sometime Magento will give us opportunity to use this nice enterprise features. With respect to single page application, so I wrote true because it's really true that checkout is now a single page application, meaning that there is only one initial request which requests a page, and as a result, it returns some HTML with configuration. And based on this configuration, Magento initialize UI components, which later used to communicate with server via AJAX, asynchronous calls via REST API, as the checkout API I mentioned, and server returns only whether it's data or configuration to reflect user interface or changes which user maybe clicked some button or something like this. UI components. It's interesting that checkout is using UI components, and UI components are using such third-party libraries as Knockout, jQuery, and package manager called require.js. Important thing about this slide is that UI components not based on Knockout and jQuery, meaning that you can replace jQuery to use your, I don't know, Angular 2, or, for example, or Node.js or something different. So basically, UI component is a layer between whatever you want to use on front-end side with respect to JavaScript and actual implementation. So by using UI components, you have this extra layer. You can put some third-party libraries and build your UI and logic on checkout side. With respect to Knockout, who had a chance to work with Knockout? Okay, so one interesting. So Magento decided to use Knockout as a MVVM model view model, and there are two interesting features. It's actually three, but it's kind of similar. First one is observable. What it does, you can have two different components, one core component, JavaScript component, and another one is custom component. And without actually, like we used to use it in Magento1 with prototype, or maybe jQuery, you will use in custom component, for instance, is logged in. You can say, I want this is logged in variable to be observable, meaning that you can listen changes of this variable. So in your custom component, you will say, I want to subscribe and listen to any change introduced for this variable, actual value. And you can use it without relying on actual HTML or templating. So it's reusage of view model. And second interesting thing, it's declarative binding. It comes from Knockout, but Magento is working hard, and they are introducing their own binding. It's in develop branch if you want to check. But in stable Magento 2.1 version, there is a data bind which helps to map view model or data and actual template. So in total, you will have this user interface which you will see on checkout site, checkout pages. This is how checkout looks like. It's one of pages. So basically, checkout consists of components, so-called UI components, and each component, whether it's just template or template with some logic. For instance, shipping method component has its own template and own JavaScript component, which is responsible for reflecting changes from a user. On two sides, what you see is actual initial configuration, checkout index.xml, initial configuration for checkout from Magento checkout module. And it's 440 lines of configuration. So with this configuration, it's more flexible, more declarative, and you can do almost whatever you want in your custom modules in order to introduce change functionality of checkout flow. So let's talk about how it works. Checkout index, where we have this 440 lines of configuration, starts with, there is almost only one block called Magento checkout block 1 page and template, which is responsible for initial, when I showed you a slide, single page application, initial request. So we're sending initial request, and actually one page PHTML is rendered on a page with all layout configuration, which goes inside argument.js layout. And what it means, in one page PHTML, we have one page HTML. It's just HTML which I will show you declares structure of a page. UI components configuration, which we declared through checkout index file, and additional logic which we can add through PHP, and checkout configuration, which we render in global variable checkout config, which, as far as I remember, Magento team is working hard to remove this global dependency, because there is a global dependency, for instance, on customer data. Customer module depends on customer data from checkout module. And there, Magento team is working on eliminating this dependency between checkout and customer module. So, with respect to templating, single one-page HTML file shows and declares actual blocks or containers where we, or Magento out-of-box edition, renders our UI components. And we have like basic containers or high-level containers, progress bar, estimation, messages, and steps. It's also known as region or get region or display area, where we want to render our first of all template and any JavaScript components which will help to process logic. And with respect to display area or container, so you can use and declare your own component, whatever Could it be like, I don't know, some additional field or additional right side section with information using display area? So this is an example of configuration of declaring your custom component. And by saying display area steps, I will render this steps custom component. In this case, it's core component in steps container. When I will say get region steps, I will render this component inside this get region. And it's interesting that Magento provides core component, which is located in Magento UI.js lib collection. And there is alias for this component called UI components. And majority, if not all components, UI components you will see and you will create will be based on this UI component. There is no need to go inside core collection.js and see what it's doing, but basically it's just ability to render or to declare child components. So you can have your parent component, by component I mean UI component, and unlimited amount of child components you can introduce for a page. Oops. I usually say on this slide that if you want to follow best practices, Magento best practices, Ben will come and show you how to develop. But unfortunately or fortunately, we have Ben here. So I don't know what to say. Sorry, Ben. Let's talk about how to extend actual checkout and introduce something new. So what do we have here? We can introduce customization on two levels. First one is front end, second is back end. What do I mean by that? That you can use PHP to reflect changes on front end, or you can use JavaScript. Yeah, let's go. It's better to go one by one. So you can reuse layouts. What I show you, this checkout index XML. So basically, if you want to have something custom, you create your checkout index.xml layout file and declare your custom component. You include it in tree of components. Where do you want to see this component? Your components is basically JavaScript and HTML. There is also a nice feature called JavaScript mixins. It's some kind of interceptor on JavaScript on front-end part. It's similar to plugins on PHP. Very interesting thing. So we can create mixin, JavaScript mixin, and for any function in JavaScript, of course, in scope of UI components in Magento. And you can say, I want to call my custom logic before this function will be triggered. Or I can say around, or I can say after, and add some custom logic. And layout processors. Interesting thing. So you can basically, layout processor, what it does, it allows you to change actual state of configuration before this configuration will be rendered on front-end part and processed by front-end and render all your page, checkout page. So this is with respect to front-end. On back-end, what you have is plugin, PHP plugin or interceptor. Extension attributes, it's a whole separate topic, I would say, talking about extension attributes. So basically, if you want to introduce some custom field and you want to save it in database, it's not recommended to say alter table, sales order, add new column, and add custom column, because you are adding backward incompatible change, and for future versions of Magento, it can conflict. So it's better to use extension attributes to include your custom attributes, and then during processing of these custom attributes, you can save in your own storage, own table, or even database. And config provider. Config provider is mostly used for such components as payment integration, shipping integration. So with respect to adding new component, here is a payment page, last page of a checkout, and for instance, as you can see, we have I agree to terms and conditions, and these terms and conditions were introduced by a separate custom block, custom to checkout, but it's still out of box. It's checkout agreement, and it's a whole new component. And what it does, it's actually introduce new link before continue to payment button, but it was introduced by using this display area or container, and you are saying I want to include my component into before place order, and it will render natively without any JAS your component. So you can add whatever number, amount, and I don't know, complex number of components in any area. Of course, in Magento2 out of the box, there are some, I would say, templates which are not having this display area on every single line, meaning that sometimes you have to copy paste core template and introduce new display area or get region or container where you can insert your custom logic. Declaration for this checkout agreements would be component in checkout index. What we are saying is checkout agreement JavaScript and sort order, where do you want to put it in order, display area, which I showed, and the only small thing you have to do in checkout agreements JS file is to say I want to use for this UI component or JavaScript component this template, and it will render natively this component. With respect to dynamic declaration, there are some logic or fields which cannot be declared in checkout index, meaning that there might be something which should be loaded from database. For instance, VAT field, depending on, I don't know, some conditions. Or you are having some custom shipping or billing address fields you want to add through admin and then render. So this is when it comes to dynamic component declaration. And in order to add this new component, you can use layout processor. Layout processor is, as I said, gives you opportunity to change state of a configuration before it will be rendered on a page and executed one by one. So basically, you can extend layout processor interface. You can introduce your own layout processor, and it will be, so basically it's composite, right? Pattern. It will for each all declared processors and will render process method, and in this process method you can add dynamic attributes or dynamic components which you want to show, or you can even introduce some configuration settings saying I want to show this this field depending on my configuration in this system configuration in admin. Component configuration. Here is as example of checkout configuration. It's payment integrations, just payment form, but as you can see in window checkout config.payment, we have all configuration related to payments. It's whether it's object or array. And for this type of configuration, for instance, payments or checkout configuration, we have a different way of adding this configuration. It's called config provider, and you can declare through DI XML your own provider and can provide or prepopulate all configuration you want to have in your custom component on front end. And here is an example of Brain3 config provider. So it also renders something from configuration or from mainly from configuration.